The glow of the phone screen was the only light in the bedroom. Rowan's laughter filled the air, sharp and charming, the same voice that millions online adored. His face shimmered under a filter, smoothed and perfected into a version of himself the world expected. To them he was untouchable, a man whose wit seemed endless. To Elspeth, sitting in the dark corner of the room, he was a stranger who shared her bed but not his truth. The camera stopped recording, and with it, Rowan's laughter vanished. He placed the phone down without a glance at her, as if the wife who waited silently had become less real than the followers who flooded his screen with hearts. Elspeth felt the distance like a physical wall. He had once been hers, before the followers, before the brand deals, before the mask that never slipped. She spoke quietly, her voice trembling. "Do you ever wonder why you never show them who you really are?" Rowan's eyes flickered, quick and sharp, before softening with practiced charm. "It's part of the game. Mystery keeps them hooked. You wouldn't understand." His answer cut her more deeply than he intended. The words weren't cruel, yet they carried a dismissal she had grown to dread. She remembered the man she had married, a man who once touched her face gently and told her she was the only audience he'd ever need. Now that intimacy had been sold for sponsorships and strangers' adoration. Narration pressed into her thoughts like a confession. What if she was the one who didn't understand? What if Rowan wasn't hiding from his fans at all? What if the mask was meant for her? The silence between them thickened. Elspeth watched the reflection of his glowing screen dance across his features, never quite revealing the man she used to know. The filter smoothed his jawline, reshaped his smile, but she caught the hollow in his eyes when the camera was off. She whispered to herself, unheard, "Who are you becoming?" Outside, the night pressed against the windows, heavy and suffocating. Inside, Rowan's laughter rose again as another video began. The man on screen brighter, sharper, more alive than the husband who sat beside her. Elspeth's gaze lingered on him, the unease in her chest deepening. Something told her this mask wasn't just a performance for the world. It was a barrier between her and the truth, and truth, she feared, was far darker than fame. Elspeth lay awake that night long after Rowan's laughter had faded and the glow of his phone dimmed. Her mind drifted back to their early days in Cambridge, when love felt raw and uncomplicated. He had been attentive then, his jokes reserved for her alone, his eyes alive with sincerity rather than staged performance. They would walk along the riverbanks, sharing secrets under lanterns, as though the world belonged to only them. Now, the man in her bed seemed hollowed out by the demands of strangers. His touch was distracted, his gaze forever pulled toward a screen. Each notification that lit his phone was another thread pulling him away. The intimacy she once knew had been replaced with a mask of curated perfection. She tried to fight the ache of suspicion, yet it clawed deeper when patterns became impossible to ignore. Rowan's late-night filming sessions stretched longer than the content he ever posted. His phone vibrated with messages marked encrypted or hidden under unfamiliar apps. Twice she had woken to find the bed empty, his side still warm, the faint sound of the front door closing minutes earlier. When questioned, his answers came too quickly, polished, like rehearsed lines for an unseen audience. One evening, Elspeth prepared dinner, setting the table for two. She waited with quiet hope, but as the food grew cold, she realized she was dining with absence. His empty chair stared back at her, a silent reminder that she was competing against millions for the attention of one man. Frustration grew into a trembling need for answers. With her heart hammering, she reached for his phone while he showered. The screen unlocked under her touch, and a flood of messages appeared. Names she did not recognize, conversations cut short, cryptic phrases about meetings and promises. None of it resembled casual fan interaction. Her pulse raced as she scrolled, her reflection trembling in the glass, as though she was staring at a version of herself unraveling. When Rowan returned, she snapped the phone shut, forcing composure. He glanced at her with suspicion but said nothing. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. That night, as he drifted into sleep beside her, Elspeth lay frozen. The thought pierced her like a blade. The mask wasn't just for his followers. It was for her too, and beneath it, she feared, there was a face she had never seen. The more Elspeth searched, the less she slept. The messages she had glimpsed on Rowan's phone burrowed into her thoughts, until silence itself felt threatening. By day, she moved like a ghost through the house. By night, she became an investigator in her own home, piecing together fragments he never meant her to see. At first, she thought the women were admirers, caught in the same illusion as thousands online. But the tone of their words was different. Intimate, private, carrying a weight she could not ignore. Some spoke of secret meetings in Manchester hotels. Others mentioned small gifts left behind. Yet when Elspeth pressed deeper, inconsistencies surfaced. One described Rowan as tall with dark hair, another as sandy-haired with a crooked smile. A third swore his accent was Scottish, not English. Her pulse throbbed as she read, a sickening realization dawning. Each woman had met someone, but not the same man. And yet they all used his online name, the one followed by millions. Late into the night, Elspeth printed their words, pinning them to a corkboard she had once used for recipes. The board grew crowded, threads of red string connecting screenshots, usernames, and places. It looked less like a hobby and more like a case file, a haunting portrait of a husband she could no longer define. Dialogue slipped from her lips as if to steady her unraveling mind. "Who are you, Rowan? Who have you been to them?" The laptop screen glowed against her tear-streaked face, lines of anonymous profiles reflecting in her eyes. She searched deeper, following usernames across forums and discarded blogs, tracing footprints that seemed to vanish and reappear under new identities. Each click pulled her further into a labyrinth, where truth shifted like smoke. When Rowan came home one evening, she snapped the laptop shut and forced a smile. He kissed her forehead absent-mindedly, his attention already drawn to the buzzing phone in his pocket. Elspeth's heart raced as if hiding a body, though it was only secrets she buried beneath her silence. That night she whispered to herself, "I don't even know who I married." The words hung heavy, louder than his snores beside her. Her obsession had only one destination now. If each woman had met a different man under the same name, then the truth was no longer about infidelity. It was about identity, and the face Rowan showed her might never have been his at all. The corkboard loomed in the corner of the room like an accusation. Elspeth had stared at it for hours before finally deciding she could no longer remain silent. The weight of the hidden messages pressed too heavily on her chest. That evening, when Rowan returned from another unexplained absence, she waited in the kitchen, her palms damp against the edge of the table. He walked in with his usual rehearsed brightness, his phone still in hand, but the mask cracked when he noticed her rigid stance. "What's wrong now?" His tone was sharp, impatient, as if she were an interruption rather than his wife. Her voice quivered yet held firm. "I've seen your messages. With those women, none of their stories match. You tell them different names, different faces. Who are you, really?" For a moment his expression froze like a screen buffering. Then he laughed, too loudly, the sound brittle. "You've been snooping again. You're piecing nonsense together because you're jealous. You always overthink, Elspeth." It's pathetic, the dismissal stung, but she pressed forward. "It isn't nonsense. One of them described you as tall with dark hair. Another said you're blonde. They've all met you, Rowan. How can that be?" His smile vanished. A flicker passed over his eyes, cold, calculating. He slammed his phone down on the table, the sound echoing through the kitchen like a gunshot. His fists tightened beneath the table, knuckles whitening, veins pulsing with restrained anger. "You think you're clever, don't you? You think you've uncovered something," he hissed, leaning closer. His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "But you don't know me at all." "You never did," the word sent a tremor through her. It wasn't just the venom in his tone, but the certainty with which he said it. For a fleeting instant his eyes seemed unfamiliar, stripped of the charm that had built his empire online. She saw a stranger staring back, someone colder than the man she married, someone who carried secrets she could not begin to fathom. Elspeth's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but her body betrayed her with silence. The only words that finally escaped were barely audible, trembling against the kitchen's oppressive quiet. "Who are you?" The question lingered between them like smoke, unanswered, as his shadow stretched long and dark across the walls. And in that silence, Elspeth knew the real terror was not the women's stories. It was the man sitting across from her, Elspeth's question, "Who are you?" remained unanswered, poisoning every glance, every silence in the house. She stopped expecting honesty from Rowan, and instead turned to someone outside their fractured walls. That was how she met Benedict Harland, a private investigator known for uncovering the secrets polite society preferred to bury. His office smelled of old paper and damp wood, the kind of place where truths came dressed in dust and cigarette smoke. He listened without interruption as Elspeth laid out the strange messages, the contradictions, the man who seemed to slip into versions of himself like second skins. When she finished, Benedict steepled his fingers, his gaze heavy. "You want to know who your husband really is?" Her answer was barely a whisper. "I need to." Days passed before Benedict called her back. This time his desk was covered in documents, passports, licenses, and birth certificates. Each bore Rowan's photograph, yet the names were different. Jonathan Fisk, Lawrence Heath, Oliver Crew. The list stretched on, each identity registered at addresses that no longer existed. Elspeth's stomach tightened as she leafed through them. "These can't all be him." "They are," Benedict replied flatly. "Every record connects back to him. But here's the thing. No consistent identity survives longer than 3 years. Then he vanishes, reappears somewhere else under a new name. Online, he's built an empire. In reality, he doesn't exist at all." Her breath caught. "So who did I marry?" Benedict leaned back, his eyes dark. "That's the question. Legally, you married Rowan Hale. But Rowan Hale was never born in any registry I can find. The man in your house may not exist at all." The weight of his words pressed on her chest until it hurt to breathe. She thought of their wedding day, the vows whispered under candlelight, the promises of forever. Was she holding the hand of a phantom then? Had she been building her life beside a ghost wearing flesh? Benedict slid a blurred photograph across the desk. It showed Rowan, or someone who looked like him, entering a building in Leeds years earlier. The image was distorted, his face caught in motion, unrecognizable despite its familiarity. Elspeth's hand trembled as she held it. For the first time, she admitted to herself that she no longer wanted just answers. She wanted survival, and survival meant uncovering what lay buried in his past. The photograph Benedict handed her haunted Elspeth long after she left his office. Rowan's blurred features seemed to mock her, as though he existed only at the edges of recognition. She wanted to believe Benedict had exaggerated, but within a week he called her back with findings that stripped away any remaining illusions. His office was darker this time, the blinds drawn, the air thick with stale smoke. A single bulb swayed above his desk, casting restless shadows across a wall now papered with grainy screenshots. Abandoned social media profiles, half-finished blogs, usernames that faded after brief bursts of activity. Each was tied to one of Rowan's many names. Benedict gestured toward the mess. He's been building and discarding lives for over a decade. Each identity leaves behind scraps. But here's where it turns ugly. Pinned among the screenshots were missing person posters, their faces overlapping like a collage of the forgotten. Young women, each connected to an alias Rowan had once used. Some were students, some were co-workers, one was even a journalist. They had all vanished without trace. Elspeth's throat tightened. "You're saying he knew them?" "Knew them?" Benedict's voice dropped low. "He was involved with them. Chat logs, photographs, bank transfers. He didn't just know them, Mrs. Hale. He consumed their lives, then erased himself. And every time one disappeared, he changed identity and started again." The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing tight with the weight of the evidence. Her mind clawed for explanations. Perhaps Rowan had simply been unlucky, connected by coincidence. But the threads were too deliberate, too precise. Each woman vanishing just as another persona was born. Images swam in her vision. Rowan's glowing phone, the rehearsed laughter, the hollow eyes when the camera was off. A chill ran down her spine as the truth settled like ice. This wasn't only deceit. This wasn't only betrayal. She might be living with a predator. Her voice cracked. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? Benedict's reply was grim. Because every time he sheds an identity, he kills the trail behind it. He's not just hiding from fans or from you. He's hiding from the law. Elspeth's pulse thundered in her ears. She felt both trapped and exposed, like prey suddenly aware of the hunter's shadow. As she left the office, the missing faces seemed to follow her. Each poster, Each blurred photo whispered the same warning. The man she called her husband had buried more than names, and if she stayed silent, she feared she would be next. The faces from the missing person posters would not leave Elspeth's mind. Their eyes followed her through every room of the house, silent witnesses to the truth she could no longer ignore. She knew if she remained quiet, she would become another blurred photograph pinned to Benedict's wall. So she gathered the evidence. Printed profiles, the false IDs Benedict had shown her, and the screenshots of women whose descriptions never aligned. She spread them across the dining table, the same table where Rowan's untouched meals had once mocked her loneliness. This time it would serve as an altar to the truth. When Rowan came home, he froze. His gaze swept over the papers, then flicked to her, cold and sharp. Her voice trembled but did not falter. I know who you are, or rather who you've pretended to be. Jonathan Fisk, Lawrence Heath, Oliver Crew. You've left behind women who vanished, Rowan. Where are they? For a heartbeat, he said nothing. Then his lips curled into a smile that bore no humor. He sank into the chair opposite, leaning back as though enjoying a private performance. You've been busy, he murmured. Did Benedict help you? He always did have a talent for digging graves. The way he said it made her blood run cold. I want the truth, she demanded. Her hands shaking. Rowan leaned forward, his voice low, intimate, poisonous. The truth is that I never wanted fame. That was a cage I built so no one would look too closely at the man behind the curtain. But control was always mine. Do you know what power it is to shape yourself into anyone? To slip into lives and leave before the rot sets in? Elspeth's breath caught. His words weren't confessions. They were declarations. He wasn't ashamed. He was proud. You're sick, she whispered. His laughter was sharp, hollow. Sick, no, free. Masks are freedom, Elspeth. Masks are weapons. Every woman believed they saw the real me, and every one of them was wrong. Even you. He rose, his shadow stretching long across the wall, devouring the room. Elspeth stumbled back until she hit the corner, her body shaking, the walls closing in. You wanted unmasking? Rowan hissed, eyes burning. Careful what you wish for. The face you seek is not one you'll survive knowing. Her pulse thundered. For the first time she realized escape was no longer a choice. It was survival. But how does one escape a man who can erase himself? The night of the broadcast, Elspeth sat alone in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator cutting through the silence. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, and the occasional flash of blue light from police cars strobed across the glass. She had made the call. She had handed over every file, every identity, every blurred photograph Rowan had tried to bury. And now, the world was watching, on the television. The documentary-style report rolled out in measured tones. Journalists spoke over stark images, the false passports, the missing women, the digital trail that led nowhere and everywhere at once. His name, his real name, was spoken aloud for the first time. Not Rowan, not Oliver, not Jonathan, a man who had erased himself until nothing remained but the wreckage of others. The screen cut to footage of his arrest, rain streaking across the camera lens. He looked smaller than she remembered, handcuffed, his shoulders hunched. Yet there was something chilling in his stillness. As if even now, even cornered, he was in control. Elspeth pressed her hand against her mouth. Her body trembled with relief, horror and grief tangled into one unbearable knot. The phone on the counter buzzed with messages, friends, strangers, journalists. Praise for her bravery, sympathy for her ordeal, questions she would never answer. She switched it off, the silence heavier than the noise. Then the screen shifted. The documentary ended with a final, grainy still of his face. Unmasked, unedited. Nothing of the influencer remained. Nothing of the charming husband. Just a man of shifting eyes and hollow expressions. A stranger the world had never truly seen until now. The image lingered too long, as if daring viewers to remember it before fading into black. Elspeth felt tears burning down her cheeks. Justice had come, yes, but the victory was hollow. The police lights outside flickered across her walls like restless ghosts. From somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered the question she couldn't silence. Was she ever free of him? Or had he carved himself into her too deeply to erase? She turned off the television, plunging the room into darkness. Outside, the sirens wailed faintly into the distance, swallowed by the rain. Elspeth sat motionless, staring at her reflection in the rain-smeared window. The glass fractured her face into something unfamiliar, someone she hardly recognized. For a moment, she thought she saw him there too, standing just behind her, his eyes watching. She blinked hard, but the shadow remained.